Attorney General Bill Barr is at the DOJ this Saturday and reading the Mueller report, deciding what he will release to Congress. We bring in Tony Katz, heard on the radio in Indianapolis and across the Midwest. Good to see you, my friend. Republicans have sure changed their tune on Bob Mueller, haven't they?
Well, not as much as Democrats have changed their tune on Bob Mueller. Let's be clear about that. You know, I love my team until I love another team. But the one thing that we can say is the release of the report. We don't know what's in it, right? I agree with that. But the release of the report on a Friday night after 5 p.m. during the NCAA tournament is bad optics for the Democrats.
Hey, what's worse optics? The fact that that's when it was given to the Attorney General, or the fact that there's no indictments coming out of it, and now you've got Democrats going, oh, well, we don't really care whether there are indictments, but we need to read the report, and then we're going to investigate the investigators.
Right. So understand that getting an indictment was actually never the goal, right? They would have been happy to have one, thrilled to have one, and said, oh, look, we were right all along. The objective of the Democratic Party with President Trump is to charge him with a crime. The crime itself is insignificant. It's the charge that matters. They want to be able to say, under investigation right through 2020. It is exactly what they want. It's the playbook that they've been playing for the last 2 years, and they're going to continue for the next 2 years. When the Democrats got elected to control the House, it started the night of 1,000 subpoenas, and it's still going on.
The question then comes, does this backfire at some point on Democrats with the storyline you've just laid out? Does it backfire on Republicans at some point who are claiming victory before having read the report as well?
Well, I don't know if they're claiming victory, but I would say that if you're
come on, Steve Scalise and everybody else is out there going, this proves no collusion.
No indictment of President
collusion.
Trump. No indictment of President Trump. No indictment of Donald Trump Jr. No indictment, no indictment, no indictment. You can't do anything else. The president should start saying no indictment every time he goes out.
That doesn't prove no.
But the point is that you would have seen something if Robert Mueller had indicted somebody, that would have been the story. So of course they have something to cheer here, and the question is, does it backfire? Does it hurt anybody? I think the president gets to engage a little bit of vindication in the idea of witch hunt, and I think that plays well in Pennsylvania, Ohio, Michigan, Wisconsin, and Indiana, the same states that won him the presidency.
We will continue watching the president's Twitter account. Chris Wallace's thoughts coming up. Meantime, Tony Katz from Indianapolis. Good to see you, my friend. Shabbat shalom. We bring in former FBI Assistant Director Mark Morgan. Mark, good to see you as always.
Thank you.
For almost all of us, except those who lived through Whitewater or lived through Watergate, the idea of a special counsel, independent counsel's report is the Starr report, which was lurid in many ways. And also exhaustive in many ways. So when everyone thinks about a report, that's what they envision the Mueller report being once it gets through Barr's reading in Congress. Is that what we're going to see?
No, and Leland, I think you're hitting on a great pillar that's not being discussed enough. The special counsel statute is completely different from the independent counsel, and there's a distinctive difference. Remember, they let the independent counsel statute lapse for a reason because of what you just said, that the Starr report was salacious and it really had information in there that didn't need to be, and it really damaged people's lives. The special counsel statute is purposefully, it's limiting. If you just look at what they require Mueller to give, they call it a confidential report. So if you just take a look at that, they're sending a signal that should be just that. It's confidential. It should not be an open report, every single word.
Confidential being an actual classification category, right, Mark?
Correct.
Not confidential in the sense that, you know, we would throw the term around.
Correct. That's right. It's a classification level. And it goes even a little bit further. So from a law enforcement perspective, again, I don't care about politics. That's not my lane. But from a law enforcement perspective I'm definitely worried about sources and methods. I'm definitely worried about 6E grand jury material that he's prohibited from releasing. And then there's a really true balance between the public interest and then the legitimacy privacy rights of people who are not indicted, who are not charged. We saw what Jim Comey did in 2016, right? He broke every ethos of an investigator by going out, talking about investigation, and then going, oh, but we're not going to indict.
Now, you mean, when you talk about Jim Comey in 2016, you mean sort of naming and shaming Hillary Clinton, but then not bringing any charges against her, right?
Exactly. It goes against...
Why is that dangerous?
Well, so it's dangerous because if you think about one of our kind of founding principles of our judicial process is. So in this case, Hillary and anybody, she didn't have the right to cross-examine. She didn't have the right to present her defense and her case. And instead, she was tried along with these people could be tried in an open public court, a public and political open court. And it's just not right.
Drill down here a little bit on something. A name that was tossed around a lot was Jerome Corsi, who was involved in the Roger Stone world. He was offered a plea deal by Mueller. He very publicly turned it down. He said, I think I'm going to get indicted. Turns out, as we now know, no new indictments coming. What does that say, that they offer a plea deal to somebody that now turns out not to have been indicted? Conceivably, you don't offer a plea deal to somebody unless you know you can prove a crime beyond a reasonable doubt.
No, not necessarily. You could think that you believe that a crime has been committed, and you're going to go and you're going to work with that individual to see if they'll go ahead and confess. But sometimes they don't confess or they don't agree to the plea deal, but you still don't have enough evidence and information beyond a reasonable doubt, and sometimes it's not prosecuted.
Having worked for Bob Mueller for 12 years, I think you said.
Right.
If you read the tea leaves, right, what do you think is in the report? Do you think we already know the sum total of the information pertaining to the investigation? Do you think and what do you think the release is going to look like? Redacted, unredacted, portions, all of it? What's your best guess?
So, no, I think you guys have summarized it well a few times here. Is we don't know what's in the report, right? Yeah, but this is what I can tell you.
We thought, maybe you were going to tell us.
I don't have any insight. But what I can tell you, I worked for Bob Mueller his entire 12 years as director, and what I'm very confident to say is that when he completed his report, it is just that. It's complete. There's no stone that's left unturned. And so when he says, I recommend no indictments, the investigation is done. It's complete. And so now we're actually talking about...
Real quick, we got to run in a second, but yes or no, there could be follow-on investigations that he referred things out to other parts of DOJ.
Absolutely.
Okay.
So that's right. So we're talking about the narrow collusion. I would add an instruction in that. I think for the most part, he's saying loud and clear that there was not enough evidence to pursue.
We got to run before the computer cuts us off. Thanks, Mark.
Mark, thank you.
You bet.
The special counsel's report in the hands of Attorney General William Barr. Just hours before its delivery, President Trump came out swinging, insisting there was no collusion between his 2016 campaign and Russia.
I have no idea about the Mueller report. We're going to see what happens. It's going to be very interesting, but we'll see what happens. There was no collusion. There was no obstruction. Everybody knows it. It's all a big hoax. I call it the witch hunt. It's all a big hoax.
This as Fox obtains new text messages tonight showing FBI officials were concerned about, quote, possible bias of a main source they used in order to get a surveillance warrant on a top Trump campaign aide. And not surprisingly, the text also revealed Bureau brass circulated at least 2 anti-Trump blog articles. Joining me now to weigh in on all of this, former Trump 2016 campaign manager Corey Lewandowski. Corey, I could see you shaking your heads. We'll talk about the FBI because you were right there when they were starting all this. But your reaction to the Mueller report being issued tonight?
Look, I think it's a fantastic thing that this witch hunt is finally over. 675 days, 1 year, 10 months, and 6 days, $40 million of taxpayer money wasted, all to show what we knew from the very beginning, that there was no collusion between the Trump campaign and the Russians, between the president and the Russians. There was no collusion, and this report has put a nail in that coffin. And what the Democrats are going to do is they're going to say, well, this isn't the end, it's only the beginning, because they can't help themselves. But what we now know, and what is just broken, is that Bob Mueller is leaving the special counsel, meaning there are no sealed indictments waiting. Right. We know that there are no current indictments waiting. This report is over. It has cleared the president. It has cleared our team, the team that they spied on because they didn't like our politics. That's what this report is now going to show.
Corey, how many thousands of times, and I'm not exaggerating one bit, how many thousands of times have Democrat politicians said there was collusion between the Trump campaign and Russia? So often, so many times, with such absolute certainty, doesn't this president deserve an apology?
He absolutely deserves apology from both Adam Schiff and Eric Swalwell, who said, without equivocation, 100% they have seen evidence of collusion. That's what they've said. And they've said, we're going to wait for Bob Mueller's report to come out so that we can go after it and impeach this president. And that's what really the goal has always been, is to use the Mueller report as a jumping off point to impeach the president. Except now, what the Mueller report shows, and it's very important to articulate, never once did anybody who Bob Mueller was reporting to ever preclude him from doing anything, from stopping him, from talking to anybody, or directing him to not do something. He's articulated that very clearly as been required. We know that he has now said in the report, we're almost certain of it, there was no collusion between the president or anybody else, and there are no indictments from anybody. So anything that Bob Mueller investigated that ended up in a criminal probe happened that had nothing to do with the campaign, whether it was Paul Manafort or Michael Cohen or whoever that may have been. But you also have to remember, they tried to get Dr. Jerome Corsi to sign a plea deal and plead guilty to something he never did. And now that the Mueller report is over, he's free and clear.
Well, and again, we have to emphasize that what we are hearing is in the report come from some sources. Obviously, we will hear over the course of the weekend, as the Attorney General has said, he will begin to roll out details of what's in the report, and hopefully we'll be able to see it from the beginning until the end. I think everybody wants that. But the moral authority of those Democrats who said with absolute certainty to the American public, to their constituents, something that apparently is not at any way in coordination with the truth. I just wonder what has happened to their moral authority as they continue these investigations. They want the public to believe that they have the moral authority to continue to investigate based on a charge that has been proved or appears to be proved false.
Well, they're morally bankrupt, clearly, and we have to remember how this whole thing began. Hillary Clinton lost the election is what it came down to. And what we found out was her team took $5 million and hired a former British spy to create this false dossier.
Right.
That Jim Comey, who at the time was the director of the FBI, presented then President-elect Donald Trump in a one-on-one meeting, and then he leaked that information both to his former law professor and to the media to say that it was a document presented to the president in a classified briefing. That's how this whole thing began. And that's why we know the whole thing was a farce. Jim Comey has hopefully legal accountability for both lying to Congress and leaking classified information. We know that his deputy, Andy McCabe, has already been referred for criminal prosecution. And we hope that Peter Strzok and Lisa Page and Jim Baker, who is the chief legal counsel there, all also get criminal referrals and are held accountable for using their badges and their positions in the government to go after Americans because they didn't like our politics.
Well, and Corey, as I'm sure you noticed, some terrific reporting by Fox News today showing that indeed there were discussions between the FBI and the Justice Department. The Justice Department officials, several, were quite worried that the FBI was using political blogs as evidence to spy on Americans. I mean, you're supposed to use evidence that's credible. You're not supposed to use politically motivated blogs in order to obtain warrants. The way in which the FBI was used to try to overturn an election and to disrupt an election before it actually happened is not only disgraceful, but it comes very close to being a coup d'etat. Would you not agree?
I agree with you 100%, and that's why I would once again ask the president to declassify those certain pages of the last Pfizer application so we can see the information that they use, because we know that the FBI was leaking information to media outlets to then include those in additional Pfizer applications, because the first Pfizer application that they tried to spy on Americans was denied because it was so outrageously against the Fourth Amendment of our Constitution. But they found a way around it. They lied, they cheated, they stole, all because they didn't like the fact that Donald Trump won. They had an insurance policy, and they did everything they could first to try and stop him, and then to throw him out of office after he was elected.
Well, using the powers of government, using the surveillance powers of the FBI and the Justice Department to spy on a political campaign, not based on any substantive evidence, but based on political blogs. Somebody's got to be accountable somewhere down the line. But at least the Mueller investigation is over, and I'm sure you're glad, as most of the American public is glad as well, as we've now seen by the polls, even before we came to the end of this investigation. Corey Lewandowski, great to see you. Thank you for being here. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Well, President Trump says the public should get to see the Mueller report, but the one making that decision is this man, Attorney General William Barr, who now has the report. What could stop him from releasing it publicly? Let's ask my next guest, Attorney Misty Maris. Frankly, I don't think anything is going to get him to stop it. Do you?
Well, there's certain legal limitations, and some of that comes with the rules of the special counsel. So certainly some parts of the report could be held back if it implicates unindicted individuals. Those parts might need to be held back. Certain documentary evidence that served as the basis to the extent that it was part of an indictment. So something like that could stop the information from being entirely public.
But it wouldn't be the substantive conclusions of the investigation, right? It would just be redacted material relating to whatever it is that is intel that cannot be released. So the public would still be able to see the substantive conclusions of Mr. Mueller.
Yes, absolutely. Those principal conclusions, those are going to be out. So we're going to know what the results of the investigation are, what Mueller actually found. That's what the public is absolutely going to hear. It's the stuff that came out during grand jury proceedings, which are secret. That will likely be redacted and kept out of the final report. But Bill Barr, he has a lot of discretion in his role in making the determination about what's going to be public and what's going to be held back for these various legal reasons.
Misty, very quickly, we were talking, Corey Lewandowski and I were talking about what went down between the FBI and the Justice Department just before and just after the election. Stuff was done that was clearly illegal, intentionally done in order to spy on a campaign for political purposes, nothing other than political purposes, with no solid evidence to do so. Shouldn't somebody be held to an account? I know Americans are fed up with investigations at this point, but this is an investigation, I think, that needs to be done, don't you?
Absolutely. I mean, the blatant abuse when obtaining the FISA warrant and the text messages that you just described in your last segment, David, it's absolutely deplorable. We're losing credibility with the feds. I mean, it's terrible. So certainly there needs to be an investigation. I said from the beginning, this should have been the focus of the investigation, this bias internally at the FBI. And certainly someone needs to be held accountable and get it back on track.